if you go to therapy, that's great, but you are part of a system, a family system, a friend system. And if that system isn't also changing and growing with you and learning, it's the chances of you being successful are far less than if your system is working.
The Headstrong Project is a nonprofit mental health organization providing confidential, barrier-free, and stigma-free PTSD treatment to our veterans, service members, and families connected to their care. This week on the show, our friend Kathryn addresses PTSD, counseling, and the Headstrong Project's outlook on veterans' mental health. Our mission here on the Veterans Voice podcast is to remind you all that you're not alone. As you hear through the stories of our guests each and every week, we have all struggled, we have all turned to poor outlets to cope with life, and we have all felt alone at times. But these are the reasons we need to all be there for one another within the veteran community, a community whose voice is needed in America more than ever. This is the Veterans Voice podcast. And this is a reminder that you're not alone.
USAA is proudly celebrating 100 years of serving the military community. It was a group of soldiers who launched USAA in 1922 by joining together to insure each other's vehicles when no one else would. Since then, USAA has grown to more than 13 million members strong. And through it all, one thing has remained. USAA is still serving the military community and their families. Find out more at usaa.com/100.
Kathryn, thank you so much for coming in. You work for an amazing nonprofit that I've actually taken advantage of. Just explain to us what Headstrong is. I could sit here and give you my portion of it, but I think it'd probably be a little better coming from you.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast today. I work for the Headstrong Project. We are a national nonprofit. We're in 15 states, including D.C. We've been in Colorado since 2018 is when we kind of came here. But let me back up just a little bit. I'll give you a little history. 30
Please.
seconds on Headstrong.
You don't have to be 30 seconds. We like long-winded people.
Oh, good. Well, it might be longer than that then. So Headstrong was founded in 2012 in New York. And three friends got together because they were tired of seeing their buddies dying from suicide, suffering with mental health because of the barriers that were out there. And they just thought there was got to be a better way. And so they pooled some resources, got some investors together, and Headstrong was founded there. It started in New York, and it was mostly in New York for the first couple years. Then we kind of did westward expansion, is the way I like to call it. And they really started targeting some areas that had a really high military population. So California was one of the other ones, specifically the San Diego area. As I mentioned, they came to Colorado in 2018. And we're in Texas, Idaho, Oregon, Washington State, Arizona, Georgia, Florida, soon to be North Carolina and Ohio, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania, Illinois, New Jersey, New York.
Wow.
I think I might have missed one, but we can recap that later.
What was the third one? Just kidding.
Yeah.
So when you guys go into a state, do you try to concentrate on the military, like you said, San Diego specifically, but San Diego's huge. So,
yeah.
But are you guys kind of swarm out to the entire state? How does that usually work?
So while we have a kind of a physical presence in some of the areas where there's a bigger concentration of veterans and or active duty, right? So veterans and military families, we can serve the whole state.
Awesome.
One of the benefits of COVID was the ability, forcefully at the beginning, but also now the ability to do telehealth and to do it really well and to deliver our evidence-based trauma treatment via telehealth really well. And so that's something that is just such a blessing because we weren't able to do that before. If you lived in rural anywhere, you either had to drive several hours or you just didn't get care. And that was part of the barrier piece. So while we do focus on military concentrated areas when we go into a state, we are always able to serve the whole state via telehealth.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you always know too, like people that decide to go get behavioral health, people that decide to go get addiction help, if they hit that one speed bump, 90% of the time they're turning the car right around. And so have that telehealth is just so important these days, and it's really, really helping out a lot of people. So what's the main focus? So I know that I believe 60 treatments, 60 counseling sessions. Is that what it was? Provided by you guys.
Sure. Well, we cover an intake, and then we cover up to 30 sessions where the veteran pays absolutely $0. So we cover 100% of care for the first 30 sessions.
That's what
Yeah.
it is.
And if you need extended care, which a lot of people do because nobody's trauma is, kind of cookie cutter. It's not a formula. If you need extended care, then veterans can still stay with their therapist, and they just pay a small copay to that clinician. It's usually $40, but every clinician's situation is different, and they have the ability to work something out with a client if they need it. So you can always stay with Headstrong as long as you're doing trauma-focused care, and that there's no time limit on that. It probably won't be 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? We hope not, because our goal is to help
need a new
getting
counselor.
feeling better. Exactly, feeling better. But that's one of our goals. We want to make sure that when you come in to do the most hardest, courageous work of your life, that you do not have to worry about paying for that.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, if you're walking out of therapy every day with a smile on your face, you're not in a good therapy session. But so, and how I'm utilizing it is I'm trying to get community care approved through the VA. But we all know how long that takes, right? so Headstrong Project has really stepped up for me. Taylor and I obviously are very honest about our behavior health and shattering the silence and talking about everything. And so when I got out of the military, I started seeing my counselor, who she's absolutely amazing. But right away she was like, let's get you signed up with Headstrong. And I think it was maybe a week that it took me to get intake and in process and everything. And then it was just, bam, we're good to go. But then through, my other foundation at Mount Carmel, I was like, hold on, we got to talk more about this because you have a huge organization and that's a lot of money. That's a big chunk and it's a big worry because even if you're using TRICARE, copays can get super expensive.
Absolutely.
And especially for the older generations too, like getting them in because some of them, don't even have TRICARE. Right. They don't even know they can get TRICARE. Some of them don't have VA, don't have VA benefits.
Yeah, they're not eligible.
Not eligible. And we've said this too. I say this a lot. I say this a lot. But I say this a lot. And then I forgot what I was going to say.
I say this a lot. And then I forget what I say.
That's all good.
Yeah, well, you were talking about like people getting connected to the VA, like having to wait. Some people aren't eligible with their, they don't even have TRICARE or they don't have any of those benefits.
Yeah. So I say this a lot, but we in Mount Carmel here, we don't care if you spent 6 months in the military. Trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. Whatever your brain is wired for is how you perceive everything, and perception's reality. So it doesn't matter if you spent 36 years in the military, 6 months in the military. Resources here are open to you. So how'd you get involved in it?
Yeah, that's a great story. So I grew up a military brat. And I do say that with love. I know that there's some negative connotation to that, but my dad was career Air Force. We moved around in the United States mostly. He worked in Space Command, and so while lots of people moved overseas and did different things, we just kind of moved back and forth from Colorado, to be honest. And then after I graduated from high school, I went to college. Was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and once I went in and kind of went to this path of counseling, I was able to work with a military life chaplain and did an entire year right after 9/11, and just really saw all of the different men and women and how it was impacting everybody. And it was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And I've served the military my entire career since then. So it's my 22nd year. I think that's right. My 20th. This is my 20th year postgraduate doing this work. But I can't imagine doing anything different. I've served the military, mostly children and families. Certainly have done active duty and veterans, but my work has been dedicated to that. So I love what I do and being able to give back. We used to joke all the time about like all the acronyms. Mental health has a lot of acronyms. Military they have more. There's not really competition, but we speak in acronyms. So I think that's helpful actually to be able to connect in the mental health world and working through that. I've worked with every branch, and actually the most Navy people I've worked with were in Colorado, which blew my mind.
Wow.
Of all the places
There's
I've been.
several joint commands here.
It's true.
There's Spacecom, Northcom. Yeah. So
Yeah.
SOC North.
I just of my career, it was that's just strange to me.
That is
That
weird.
was where I worked with most of the Navy guys.
I
So
haven't seen any water over here for a long time.
yeah.
So 20 years in, started right after 9/11. Have you seen a negative progression of mental health as the war went on?
Absolutely.
Was it? I mean, I'm sure it was like palpable. Like,
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and in the beginning, nobody knows what to expect, right? And then the kind of the waves of men, mostly men that were going over, some women that were coming back, and just trying to help them figure out how do you have a file for that, what they've experienced. Nobody had experienced since several wars, many years before that. And I think part of the mistake is that they were taking a lot of people and it was the resending of people over and over and over again without enough pause, without enough ability to kind of like regulate. And as we used to talk about it, flipping the switch on and off, you flip the switch on when you're in combat and in theater and you try and figure out how to switch it off. Well, it gets to a point when it's your 4th or 5th deployment
back to back.
in 3 years or whatever it is, you don't even know if the switch is on or off. And so certainly there was a need for that for our country, for what we were doing, but the people were getting lost in some of it. And so, there certainly has been moments of that where it was really scary for a while.
Yeah. Cause it's like, how do I compartmentalize this, but also talk about it?
Yeah.
But then I also still need to keep my edge.
Exactly. How do you get ready to flip the switch back on when you don't know if you're going to go again, or you're going again in 30 days? It's like, I'm not opening that up. That's nice and tucked tight.
Yeah.
So I think
I can't feel my emotions right now. No, I mean, it was almost exact timing. 2 months to the date before I left, I turned. My wife would walk around the house. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I'm like, it just does it on its own. This is war mode. Like, I just got emotionless.
Yep.
And it sucks because my wife wants to spend all this quality time with me right before I leave, but I'm like, my brain's already shut off. Like, I'm already in that mode, and it sucks. So it's like, and you have to.
It's survival.
Yeah, you have to go to that mode, because if you go over there with way more emotions than you need, it's going to be a rough trip. You're gonna feel a lot more of what you're seeing than you need to.
And war, like, I feel like it reassures that switch being on, because you turn this switch on and then it saves your life in a firefight or on a convoy or whatever. You have your switch on and then it works and you're like, man, this is good. It just saved my life. Like, my own intuition, my own instincts, my war instincts. And so then you come home, how do you turn it off when you were just told that this is the right thing to do?
That's
and
right.
it saved your life. So
Yeah, it's that positive negative reinforcement loop. It's backwards. I mean, it's good and it's also bad at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why a lot of us, especially special operators, we have a much larger gray area than other people do.
I like to just say mine is still always on, but I'm just really quiet.
But I meditate.
Yeah.
I've heard somebody describe it as you have a dimmer. It's now just not on and off. It actually, you have levels.
Right.
I remember
a
long time ago talking, we were sitting around with a bunch of other Green Berets, and one of my buddies, how we sit there and talk about this, the zombie apocalypse, the Civil War would be awesome. Like, that's what we're trained for. It'd be so cool. He was, my buddy was like, well, I'm not really scared about the war. I think that'd be, that's what we do. Like, if there's a war here, that's what we do. The only thing I'm terrified of is having my family see me be that person. And I was like, oh, that was pretty early in my career too. I was like, dang, that's deep. Like, but I was like, man, it's super true. Like, I don't want them to see me doing half the crap I did, like, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, sorry, go down a rabbit hole there. Headstrong.
I got kind of I got a follow-through question on that. So you have these guys who come home, turn the switch on, war tells them that this is the right thing. How do you guys find counselors that understand that? Or do you guys find counselors?
Oh, yeah.
Because, like him and I,
That's
Paul,
huge
like,
for us.
I don't want to sit down with like a senior in college or like someone who's just been in a classroom and, man, like, I've seen some stuff. Are you ready to hear it?
Right.
So I think that's the biggest thing. Like Paul said, he switched counselors. It didn't work. He went back. So it's like, how do you find counselors who understand the mindset that we're coming in with?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. So that is 100% my job and my counterpart, Dr. Anna Crane. That's what we do. We understand working with this population. We very much look for military cultural competence. They can't just have a neighbor that was in the Army and think that they know everything about the military. Like, they can't, because that doesn't go well. So we look for people who, preferably have had some connection with the military. Either they have been in the military themselves, they are a spouse or dependent, they have done a lot of work with the military even as a civilian, and they've also continued to go to military cultural competence training. For the right clinicians, we will provide that to them. We have courses that they have to take. They do supervision with us to bring them on, so that when you are going in to talk to them, they may not know your specific situation, especially if it was, not necessarily a well-known, situation, but they're going to know enough of the right things about what to ask, what not to ask, and how to make sure that you feel confident that they're going to be able to hold all the things that you want to give them. And so that's one thing that we look for in particular. I'm really particularly picky. I want people that are at least 5 years post-licensure, for your point about the younger person. And, I want people that have really done a lot of the trauma work with adults and used it. It's great if you've been trained in EMDR, but if you've only been using it with teenagers, not necessarily going to equate to the same kind of level. And again, for the right people, we do a lot of work to make sure that we are training them up and supporting them and making sure that they're the best people for you all. But we really start looking from at the top. And sometimes it makes it difficult for us to find the right people, because there's people that are like, oh yeah, I know the military. My neighbor's in the Army. That's a true story, by the way, of somebody I've talked to. And that was all the military cultural competence that they thought they needed, which was a little scary. We did not hire that person.
Yeah, they probably have it on their. They probably have it on their freaking billboard too. Military.
Probably.
Military experience.
Yeah. I remember. I mean, one of my buddies went to this VA appointment, his behavioral health, appointment for his rating, and the guy he was talking to started crying over one of his stories.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was like, it's a bad story. It's not a good one. But, we did a lot of work with another clinic here in town. And when they very first opened up, I went over there and was talking to them. I'm like, hey, how many military have you worked with? They're like, oh, we've worked with a lot of military. Like, how many special forces? And they're like, none. I said, okay, I'm going to go get the behavioral health OIC from 10th group, and we're going to come over here and give you a capabilities brief. And they were kind of scared when we walked out, because I told them, I was like, listen, if you justify one bad behavior, if they come in and say something to you, there's a reason they're saying that.
Yep. If
you justify any of that, you're going to lose them right away. And that relationship is incredibly important. You have to have that relationship. Counselors are like barbers. If the barber gives you a bad haircut, are you gonna go back to the barber?
Right.
No. And they're okay with that. Counselors are okay. There's a lot of times where counselors are like, hey, I don't think this is a right fit.
Right.
And that's a really good counselor.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's having you guys vet these clinicians coming through is really, really cool.
Yep. Well, and I think it's, to your point, it's really important that they understand the population they're working with, right? Because it might be session 7 or 8 that you decide it's finally time that I can actually give a little and see what they do with it. Some counselors don't have the patience for that. If you don't know that that's the population, if you feel like you're being interrogated as the therapist, that is probably true. And that's okay, because the more that you do that, you're going to find out if you're the right fit both ways around. Now, there's also that fine line about not trying to help people enable, not to reinforce avoidance, because nobody wants to talk about this stuff. This is the most horrible things that have ever happened to you, whether it's childhood or, combat. We don't care, just to be clear. Like, you could have had a fine military career and could have had a really terrible childhood. And if you want to work on childhood trauma, we're fine with that. Because again, our goal is just to help you heal from whatever it is. But, it can take a while to be able to develop that trust in that relationship. And one false move on one side and you ruin the trust that's being built. And so really having people understand what that looks like.
And that's, a good point too, of like 6, 7, 8 sessions. Like when I very first started going to see counseling, my wife and I were not in a great spot. She had some mental health or behavioral health issues, and along with mine, obviously, that I had. We were just not in a great spot. I never talked about the war. I never talked about anything. I went in there once a week and screamed at my counselor about stuff that I just wanted to get off my chest that I couldn't get off my chest to my wife, because her anxiety was so bad that if I brought up a bad thing to her, she would, it was bad for her too. So it was like I was just keeping my mouth shut. So it's like sometimes it takes a while to peel that onion back and finally get through the layers and have people open up. And then I would start talking about, things that I've seen and things that bother me and stuff like that. But that's just not what I needed at that time. But my counselor was awesome. I mean, she probably said 10 words in the first 3 sessions I had with her because I was just like, freaking out. And then another thing Taylor and I have noticed in here too is especially when it comes to combat arms and special operations, a lot of childhood trauma. A lot of childhood trauma. And that comes up a lot more. I'll tell you, with all my work with nonprofits in the last, 8 years, I don't get very much PTSD conversations at all. It is a lot of, how do I get out of the military? This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. My childhood was completely messed up. And so it's like, another thing to say out to the counselors are, working in these communities of like, this is a multi-pronged situation.
Right.
You got to put your feelers out there and see what's actually bothering this person. Because a lot of the times it's way before the military.
If you think about what draws people to the military, it's stability, it's family, it's being taken care of. Everything is taken care of for you as far as your health care, your, where you're going to live or what your stipend is or whatever that is, right? But it's, and the structure is there. So people who come from trauma from their childhood don't have those things. They didn't have structure. They didn't know where their food was coming from. They didn't have stability. They didn't have a family in a lot of cases. And so the military fits the bill for so many people that have that.
Sure.
The problem is that they just figure they're just going to grow out of it or whatever. And then you go into trauma, you go into the military, and you could have multiple traumas. You could have, you could just have a car accident that has nothing to do with the military as an adult.
Yeah.
Or you can go to war and you can see some of these things and it all compounds.
Yeah.
I agree with that completely. I would add accomplishment too, because I think in in the special areas of the military, like high tier, you have to go through 3 years of training and an assessment. It's an accomplishment feeling. I know in a lot of my Green Beret buddies didn't have a father around, grew up in a single mother household. Dad was an asshole to them, super strict parents. They got something to prove to the world. So you join the military because you got something to prove to the world, and then you're going to be special in the military. And then you realize that none of this is actually proving anything to anyone, and now you're miserable even more.
And you get out,
and now you got PTSD for more, and you're like, what was I doing? But I think that's the story. Like, in short, you have childhood trauma. You feel like you got something to prove to whoever. You join the military, and then it doesn't work, and then you're just kind of stuck.
And I'll even add another one too: resiliency. Like, if your dad's been yelling at you and beating you your whole life, a drill sergeant's nothing to you.
You're nice and accustomed to what that looks like.
Just getting yelled at again, but and that resiliency piece too of, that sometimes that's why the war stuff doesn't bother these people as much, is because like, man, I grew up in hell, and so that PTSD portion, it's there, but compartmentalization is a lot easier for the people with super high resiliency. I think things that have been through trauma since a very young age, so it's.
Well, you can't succeed in your jobs, especially the special operators in any branch, if you don't know how to do that. If you haven't mastered compartmentalization, if you haven't mastered hiding your emotions and working through them, if you haven't mastered all of those things. And so it absolutely serves you well for the time that you're doing what you're doing. And then when you want to go have a regular conversation about the cute little duckies, with your 8-year-old, there's some struggle, what I mean? Because if everything's locked up all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's a real thing.
You're trying to have that conversation and someone's being loud in the background and you're just like, you can't sit there and focus on your kid because I want to kill that guy over there. That's happened.
You start to cope certain emotions with other emotions, like compartmentalizing. I have, sadness from childhood. Let me cover this up with anger of war. So you just have these huge emotional pools building within your head, and they all just become out of control because you're not compartmentalizing anyone. You're just building up this one, and in order to counter it, I'm just building up more anger to counter the built up sadness. It's a disaster. It can be, that's for sure.
I describe it to people a lot of times as if you take a bottle of Coke, right, and you shake it up. That's your emotion. That's your activation. And then you try to open it, right? It starts to spew. Well, you tighten that puppy back down again, wait for it to settle. And then you kind of open it up again and nope, still, and that's kind of how that compartmentalization is operating. It's not functional. Eventually, either you have to wait for it to come all the way down and open it, or you got to open it and let everything spew out, and then you got about half the bottle.
You just need a good therapist
like
to
that
open
analogy.
it all the way.
Yeah. Well, to help you give you the tricks about what you do, you tap the top, you do a little bit of how you do those things. So
Then you learn you shouldn't drink Coke at all.
Dr. Pepper, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Carbonated beverage.
Colorado Computer Support. Imagine never having to worry about your information systems ever again. Colorado Computer Support, the exclusive Veterans Voice technology partner meeting all of our computing needs. Colorado Computer Support is veteran-owned. They're your team for innovative, collaborative IT services and solutions to enhance and support your Colorado business. When you need IT services to keep your business going, make sure the Colorado Computer Support team is on your team. Call 719-355-2440. To learn more, that's 719-355-2440.
The Veterans Voice is sponsored in part by Optum and is produced in the Optum Podcast Studio. Optum and Mountain View Medical Group offer 15 clinics throughout the Pikes Peak region. Their primary and specialty care doctors provide quality, patient-centered care backed by Optum's industry-leading health services and technology. They're dedicated to helping our community live healthier while keeping care affordable. Visit optum.com/Colorado to learn more and schedule your appointment today.
All right, so now I want to ask you the inverse. I asked you if it's, how it's progressed negatively. How have you seen the stigmas and the acceptance of behavioral health and counseling excel in the last however long you've seen it make a change?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, yes, while there was a period of time where it was bad and things were really, nothing seemed to be making sense. But right before COVID started, there was really a good progression of things changing about destigmatizing it in certain populations. So military for sure, first responders. And really in the last couple of years, I think specifically, and I don't know if that's the access to mental health, via telehealth where people can get that if there's because of some of the different healthcare reforms and pieces, but there has been a light at the end of the tunnel. And really what it looks like is hope. Yeah. Having hope that you can overcome these things. People used to think for a long time that if you have PTSD, you have it for the rest of your life, and you don't. That's not necessarily everybody's story. And so just making sure so there's that element of hope that really kind of has come out in the last couple years in particular, even though we've still had unrest, there's still been some crazy stuff, but we're making some forward progress. I mean, as to the fact that how many people are seeking help now, how many people are wanting to be able to address it. And in certain pockets of the military, they are also embracing that in a different way.
In a completely
Not all,
different way.
but there are some really great shining stars of active duty places where they are really supporting their people and their families. There's some great VAs out there that are really making some headway in some different places. So, I mean, again, those are some two huge wins, I think, that are really kind of helping us, continue that message of hope.
And when I think like organizations like Headstrong Project and Soft Network and all the nonprofits that are out there that are being open and honest about it too is incredibly important. And there's more and more hands sticking out to help every day. I've seen. I mean, getting in the nonprofit world, I was just blown away on how many nonprofits there are and how many organizations there are just to help, because unless you actively research it, like it's hard to find. And nobody wants to sit there and listen to the VA brief and you're getting out. You're ready to get out. Like you're just tired of it, right? So then what happens? You go home, and you start feeling a little crappy about your life, and then you isolate, and then the bottle comes out, and then it's a snowball. But that's Taylor and I's our mission here is to just show everybody you're not alone. Yeah. And hopefully that person sitting down in their basement right now with that bottle flips us on. Here's a story that he can connect with, and it's like, oh crap. And then push out the resources for this help and bring people on like you for the that are actively out there trying to get people to get help. I really saw it. I think I saw it in about 2015, 2016 when I came. It was right around my Estonia trip. I came home and I said something to somebody, and they were like, "Oh, just go see either the Mifflick or I can't remember. It was somebody. I was at Germany at one time, and I was like, really." And I go over there, and there's like 3-4 people sitting there waiting. I was like, oh, people do this? I was like,
this is a thing now. Okay.
I was like, holy cow. I was like, And I saw some of the people, and they're pretty prominent people, people that have very successful in their careers. And so I right then and there, my brain shifted. I was like, oh man, okay. But I really will say when it really hit was the last 2 years, the shutdown in Afghanistan.
Yep.
When people came home, Green Berets' outlet was war. That was our stress reliever. Everyone's excited to go. Yeah, the times, you're getting some hairy stuff, but like we had a lot of training to go to war to do our job. And I'd have met very many of them that hated it, And so now we don't have that outlet. And people are sitting back here in Garrison. We're going to Eastern Europe. We're going to other places that it's not war. There's basically Walmarts. So we have to address our feelings now.
Yep.
We have to address all these problems that we were able to cover up with pulling triggers. And so the amount of people that have come up to me in the last 2 years with, Mount Carmel and my other nonprofit, is astounding that we don't have enough counselors now. And that's awesome, but not.
Right. Well, and while there might be a lot of bodies out there that are counselors, but having them know that your specifics kind of how your experience is going to be the best served, right? Because understanding, Green Berets, understanding those special operators, understanding just when we were in Afghanistan and when we were in Iraq and when they overlapped. Let's talk about that, because there's a lot of people that don't have a clue.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, even 10th group they were 6 months on, 6 months off for
decades.
Yeah, a decade probably.
Oh, yeah.
I know guys that have 10, 13 deployments, combat deployments. That's
heavy.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And then, some of them weren't the greatest. Some of them weren't, crazy. Some of them were pretty, but like having that many, you've been through a lot of stuff.
You sit down with someone and they're like, I don't remember which deployment this was, but this story is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like, well, you don't remember which deployment this was on? And you almost, this is wild.
It's
so
wild.
much respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I only had 3 combat deployments. One of them I wasn't SF, but so I didn't, have a ton. And that's, a lot of my stuff isn't PTSD. Is there stuff that I've unpacked from there? Absolutely. But yeah, you have people that are just seasoned.
I had a question, maybe like help out some listeners. Kathryn, I don't know how like in the weeds you are with like patients these days, but how
I still see clients.
Okay, so in your mind, how does like PTSD show up like on a day-to-day life for like a typical soldier, would you say? And then maybe Paul and I can both say how we think it presents in our life.
Oh, sure. Yep. Number one usually is sleep. That's actually what drives people to get help of any kind, is because they're not sleeping.
Oversleep or undersleep?
It looks a little different. Oversleep tends to be more linked to depression, which is also a symptom of PTSD,
Sure.
can be. But, problems sleeping, problems falling asleep, problems staying asleep, nightmares, night terrors, sleep. Number one is probably one of the number one things. And again, it's really usually what actually leads people into care more than anything else, whether they realize they have trauma or not. It's like, I've not slept in it feels
Something's
like years.
gotta change.
And I've got to do that because my wife says it, my kid says it, my job says it, whatever it is. Sleep is probably one of the number ones. Lots of anger. Anger comes out easily, and that comes with irritability, short fuse, not being able to tolerate any kind of disturbance, and it comes out as anger because if you think about being like a live wire all the time, your body is just like sensitive. So like, if you ever had a toothache and you like suck in air and you're like, oh my gosh, my face is going to come off. Yeah. That's how it is all the time when you have PTSD, right? In certain intervals or in certain places. Relationship issues.
Sure.
That's another one.
Getting into them or being in them, probably both.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Or never getting into one ever.
Yes, right. Yeah, never wanting to,
Yeah, just the extreme of anything.
Had some friends like, you're going to date her? Cool. This should be fun.
She does what? Oh.
Yep.
I won't fill in the blank there, but you probably can.
Well, there's lots of options for that, I'm sure. Those typically, hypervigilance, sure, always kind of just feeling like you can't get comfortable. You're not, nothing's ever quiet. If it's either too quiet or it's not quiet enough. I mean, those are kind of like the top 4, really. I mean, there's lots of, so one of the things about PTSD too is it depends on what happened to you before you had your traumatic experience and what has happened since then. Also talks about the other symptoms, right? So anxiety, obviously it has its own classification now, not just, so post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety used to be lumped together in the DSM-4. Now in the DSM-5, they have their own categories because you can still have really being on edge, super worrying, over worrying about things and have PTSD, and they can be not related to the same thing. So one of the things that we look at, when you work with trauma is that suicide is that there's a high prevalence of suicidality. Not necessarily dying by suicide, why that does happen. What we're looking for, though, is those symptoms of loneliness, isolation, feeling like I can't live as a live wire anymore. Like I just want this part to end. And so making sure that we really, look for those pieces, and that shows up as more of depression. So I don't know. Those are kind of the top 5.
Yeah.
What I missed.
You got all those? I got.
Yeah, check. That's like,
Do you
check.
have like any, like the whole point? Do you have any like unique ones maybe that aren't like cookie cutter?
I mean, mine is depression and anxiety.
Sure.
Really bad. Like my anxiety is the worst in like huge groups of people when I feel like I literally feel like I'm the only one just kind of looking around like this, and everyone is like the situational awareness is not even a word in the civilian world,
Right.
Which is like terrifying to me. So that's lines. Hate lines. Can't do lines. Road rage. It's got a little better. A lot better after my non-standard care stuff, but I don't know if we could talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Driving
afterwards.
a monster truck helps too. Just
Driving a huge truck helps. Yeah. Actually, driving a truck with the foundation all over the side of it helps because I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, mine, I isolated pretty bad there for a while.
Yeah.
Oversleeping for sure. Like there'd be days I had 10, 12 hours, and I'm just like, and then even when I got up after that, I'm groggy because I slept so long, and I'm like, I don't have anything to do today. I don't want to go do anything.
Yep.
No
purpose.
Yeah, we talked about it of, our life was so structured. I was in for 22 years, and my life was so structured. Everything was done every day. When the day I got out, I was like, I don't want structure. I'm going to go work out whenever I want to work out. I want to wake up whenever I want to wake up. Well, that went on a little too long. Because guess what I need? I need structure.
Yeah.
Because that non-structure led to depression for me and led to isolation.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's so different in everybody.
Yeah.
I've never heard the same story twice. So you have to attack every problem completely differently.
Yeah, I resonate more with like the anger side, and this is just something I recently uncovered with my therapist, who I interviewed extensively before we started doing business. But we're on a special forces team, right? Before that, I was on the Army bomb squad, 2 very elite jobs. So I was very used to, for almost 14 years, being around top 0.01% people, and then like when they would mess up, I would get angry. So now I'm surrounded by the normal world, and it's like I still subconsciously hold people to a very unrealistic standard. And this sounds greedy, but it's just realistic because it's what I did for 14 years. I was around people I could definitely count on no matter what. So when you talk about like being in a line, everyone's on their phone, no one has situational awareness. I'm like looking around like anything could happen at any time, and you guys are just staring at your phone like we're at the DMV. This place could blow up any second.
People are bumping into the back of you.
Right.
Like that's that. Oh man,
Yeah.
when
Like,
you're
pay
just
attention.
I don't care if someone bumps into you. It's an accident, right? But like when you're just like so obviously not paying attention that you're just like running into shit.
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah. So maybe that's like our hypervigilance that's been programmed into us in the military, but then like other people's lack thereof angers us.
yeah, 100%.
Hard to explain this one though. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think you guys did a great job of that. It is 100% that you're used to being in a certain environment, and when you get out of that, nobody teaches you how to recreate the parts of that environment that you liked. You have to kind of figure it out on your own, right?
Yeah.
You do that with your friends, you do that with your family, you do that with work, but it's not easy. You can't just like set up a structure for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you could write it down on paper, but you're not going to, because you can. When you are in charge of it, the only person you're letting down if you don't do it is you.
Yeah.
When you work for purpose,
Accountability.
You have so many other people, and you may not want to get up and go do that, but you know that 10 people in your group, your whatever, are going to count on you to do that, and you know that you can count on them.
Right.
When you're in the line at the store, you ain't count on nobody because they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
You know, there's no relationship, there's no higher purpose, a higher goal of what you're doing.
Right.
I just hired a physical trainer. Like, I was always good at like working out, I'm always good at making my own programs, but it's like when I'm just sitting at my house doing it by myself, now my accountability is money because it costs a lot of money. So I'm going to use it.
Right.
So
That's
like,
a thing. That's for sure.
like, and as crazy as that sounds, but that's what works for me. And
It's true.
there has to be something that makes me say, okay, I have to go do this.
Yeah.
Because especially, man, I was working out in my job or working out in my garage, and I was like, I'd have 1 or 2 sets left and be like, man, I can go back inside.
It's too easy.
It's too easy. All right, Kathryn. So Headstrong, you brought some stats. Do you have some events or anything coming up?
Well,
Do you guys have anything? What do you guys got going on?
yeah, so we are kind of our 2 big things is we're gonna be able to open services in North Carolina and Ohio this fall. So we're really excited about that.
North Carolina's huge for special operations.
Yep, know that. Yep. And I think the biggest thing that we wanted to kind of bring awareness to is we've been so lucky to be partnered with USAA for the last 2 years in their Face the Fight movement.
For sure.
And so we have been able to train over 150 of our own clinicians in suicide intervention and prevention strategies, which is huge.
That's huge, yeah.
And because of our work with USAA, the Cohen Network, and Stop Soldier Suicide, over 5,000 clients in the last year have been able to receive suicide intervention and prevention services, which is amazing, right? Trying to get some of that information out about suicide is really important because there is hope. You are not alone. There are lots of ways to kind of be able to check in on each other. September happens to be Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and so just really making sure that we think about it all the time, but especially this month to draw awareness to that. It's a good way to kind of kick off before the holiday season, which inevitably, creates stress.
Tough.
It's a lot of loss. There's loss of not necessarily of life, but just loss of lots of things that happen around the holidays. And so really kind of making sure that people are aware of that. We're grateful for our partnership to be able to spread that information and be a part of delivering 5,000 services.
Yeah,
It's
for
like
sure.
amazing.
I was just going to say, that's cool to hear USA sponsors the show. We just had Chuck Bunch on here. He's the lead for Face the Fight. We did about a 90-minute interview in here a couple weeks ago. So
Oh, that's awesome.
It's cool to hear that partnership.
Yeah. We're, like I said, we're in our 2nd year with them, and it's just been absolutely fabulous.
They're doing amazing things for
They
sure.
really are.
For
Yeah.
sure are. No, that's cool. Yeah, with suicide prevention coming up, it's tough, and we got to be tougher. We have to be tougher about it. We got to be more open and honest about it. You got to talk about it, and we bring it up in here quite a bit.
Yeah.
But to hear those stats and hear USA doing this, doing that, and you guys, it's really great because that's what makes it able to talk about. Because you're not just sitting around a campfire going, "Hey guys, let's talk about suicide," right?
Right.
Usually the only time is when it's bad.
Yeah.
So recognizing those signs and seeing, we're trying to get more suicide preventionists with our foundations, and because to be able to recognize those signs, to have those conversations early and often, as cliche as that sounds, but is incredibly crucial.
I think one of the things that's great about what we do and what you guys are doing by bringing awareness, right? It's trying to normalize what it is. From a therapeutic standpoint, I'll say this, right? Just because you talk about suicide doesn't mean a therapist is going to put you in the hospital.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that almost every client asks in the first or second session is when we bring it up, because everybody should be talking about it as often as you can, because it's part of living with trauma. Wanting that to be over, wanting to not suffer any longer is a human need, and being able, and that looks very different. And so being able to talk about it when you really are feeling like that those are some of those thoughts and feelings that are happening. Just because you talk about it doesn't mean, one, that something bad is going to happen to you about it. If you bring it up to somebody, it doesn't mean, so for the layperson, if you're like worried about somebody, bringing it up doesn't mean they're going to go commit suicide. In fact, usually it means exactly the opposite. It means somebody cared, somebody noticed, all of those things. And so really just normalizing that. Doing this work, trauma work, is hard. It takes courage. It takes the right time for people. It is not something I thank clients every day when they come into my office and they want to work on it, because it is not something that's easy.
No.
At all. And it
thing in
is
the world.
hard to face that. But also the goal is to start to lift the burden and start to feel better in some area of your life. And if we're working together for a few months and it is not getting better and we're not having a conversation about why, then that's something you need to be bringing up and maybe thinking, maybe this isn't the right person for me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I tell people that, if you do have that friend, I always say, I'd rather lose a friendship than a friend, right? So seeing those signs and having the counselors and making sure you are talking about this is just incredibly important. But where do you see TBI in this?
Yeah. It's hard to have a TBI and not have trauma.
Yeah. Impossible, actually. Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible for trauma, but for have some mental issues. It's part of your brain shut off.
That's right. Yep. So, we see it a lot, obviously. One of the things that makes working with somebody who has a traumatic brain injury and doing trauma work, oftentimes it affects memory. So they need more reminders, especially if there's homework or things that they're supposed to be doing. And so really making sure that you're evaluating somebody's ability to remember what they're supposed to do when they leave session, right? Yeah. How many times am I supposed to practice breathing? Like, what conversation am I supposed to have? Like, what does that look like? To make sure that they know what they're doing, because a lot of times that's not there. Yeah. Sometimes therapy goes a little slower, just depending, at least in the beginning, as you're trying to kind of figure out what does that look like, but totally doable, to a certain extent. And you don't, with the information that we're learning now, especially about blast TBIs and blast injuries that aren't even being classified as I blacked out, I had loss of consciousness, any of those things, some of those like second and third wave blasts are worse by far. And learning about that, so we tried to stay up to date as much as we can on all of that kinds of research, because it really does impact what we do. But you're not going to go to regular kind of talk therapy. You're not going to go to cognitive behavioral therapy or trauma therapy to heal from a TBI. No. There is other specialty things that you should be doing in conjunction with. Yeah.
So we're big on the
help, but
we're big on the hyperbaric TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. Ketamines, we've seen, expanding that neuroplasticity. Some of the non-standard care has been pretty effective. And we've noticed the combination of those three is incredibly effective. But there's very few clinics around here that do that. And it's every day for 12 weeks.
It is. It's a lot. It's a time commitment. Yeah. It can be expensive. Sometimes parts of it are hard on the body. The other piece that a lot of people miss is to make sure that you're getting your visual taken care of with TBI too. So the ocular, going to see a TBI at optometrist, so they can make sure, because they can do some non-invasive, non-medication things with your visual field that will help with dizziness, and actually can then help with some of the memory pieces, because the body's overcompensating. So making sure that you look at that too.
Yeah, I went to Intrepid Spirit a few years ago before I got out, and when they did the eye test on me, I was like, whoa, because and you don't even really think about it, especially someone combat arms like myself, where I'm behind a gun. I was behind a gun a good chunk of my career, aiming, using one eye. And so my left eye basically just didn't want to play with my right eye anymore. And so it just kind of and then eye fatigue sets in, and just driving eye fatigue set in, So it's pretty crazy that the different modalities that can help with all this stuff, and really attacking it as holistic as absolutely possible is incredibly important. Behavioral health is everything. It messes with your hormones. Your hormones can mess with your behavioral health, your TBIs, your sleep. Everything is just really trying to attack it, and that with a holistic view. But that's why people stop.
Yep, agreed.
Is because it's hard. I don't know if we were recording when I said that, but my addiction, behavioral health, all these things. You hit one speed bump, 90% of people turn right around and not go through with it because it's hard.
Yep, it is hard. One of the things that we offer too is we believe in the holistic approach, as far as if you go to therapy, that's great, but you are part of a system, a family system, a friend system. And if that system isn't also changing and growing with you and learning, it's the chances of you being successful are far less than if your system is working. So, for us, not only can you get individual care for 30 sessions, we'll also do family or couples.
That's amazing.
And we'll pay for 30 additional sessions in that. In certain markets, we will be able to pay for neurofeedback, which, brainwaves, so helping with, PTSD, sleep, some of those different pieces. And then we also offer psychiatry for short term to be able to get stabilized and be able to do that. In some cases, depending on the situation, we'll also offer therapy for a spouse or life partner if they've been negatively impacted by the service member's trauma themselves. And so, they're, again, trying to figure out and take that whole system approach. Not very many people are able to do that, at least as comprehensively and as little cost to the actual veteran as they possibly can. So
yeah. I mean, again, I always say, but a soldier with a broken family is just as bad as a broken soldier. With all these modalities, with all these treatments, all these options we have to fix yourself, if you're going back home into a bad environment, it's not going to work.
Right.
Because you're going to get upset. You're going to forget everything you learned because it's, shit in, shit out. Right? Like if you're internalizing bad stuff, if you're putting more trauma and trying to work on trauma,
right.
You're going to find yourself in the same position.
It's hard to do this work with a partner, in my opinion.
It is.
Because they see the old you all the time. So it's almost like they just treat you how they used to treat you, or they're expecting a certain behavior that you're trying to get rid of, and then you can see them expecting it, and it's just not there, and that almost brings it back out of you. Does that make any sense?
Then you externalize. Is that the right word? No, that's not what I'm trying to say.
Sounds good.
You expect them to look at you that way.
Right.
A lot of the times they don't.
Right.
I mean, a lot of times they do, but like my wife even said me retiring was the hardest thing she's ever done because she had this Green Beret that she was married to for so long, the protector of the house, and now I'm in the basement crying because I don't know how to control what's going on to me. And she's like, what? And then of course wives, they want to help, and just like husbands, they want to help, and they're like, what do I do? Like, is it my fault? What's going on?
Right.
So all the spouses out there, please understand that. Get help too when your spouse is going through this sort of thing, and retiring, transition out of the military, going through behavioral health issues. Like, you really you're unfortunately going to take some of the burden on no matter what.
Yeah,
it's because it's your family, so it's going to affect you. So, and even the counselors, the telecounselors that we work with through here, counselors need counseling. We are people that get into this field are doing it because they're nurturers and they want to take care of people. So you're automatically putting all this burden, not only your burden now, all these people's burdens that you're seeing. So the whole system, that's really awesome. I didn't know you guys do that. I might have to hit you up for couples counseling.
Yep. It's one of those things. And whenever there's a transition, it's a new chapter, and you both have to read the book, or nobody's going to understand what's happening. And there's a lot of that, especially when you've been with somebody for 15, 20 years. There's been a certain pattern of things. But if they're trying to do something different, if you break your shoulder and you get it rehabbed, it's still not going to work the same way that it did before.
Yeah.
There is no reason why we should expect that our brains are going to do the same thing. And so it's going to work maybe better in some ways, maybe not in others, but expecting that everything is going to go back to the way that it was is not a realistic expectation. So we do a lot of work, at least I do when I work with people, about educating their family and their spouses around like what this is going to look like. But again, instilling hope that things are going to change, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be bad. Like, the whole goal is to make sure that that everybody's having a positive healing experience.
Yeah. I mean, you decided to come in the door. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? If you didn't come in the door, it's going to get worse. Like, there's no doubt about that. It's going to get worse. But now you're here and you're taking the steps. Do the work, and do the work with the whole family too. So I know you got to take off here soon. I do want to ask you the question though. Can you tell me a story if you have one? If not, no big deal.
Oh, yeah. So there was a gentleman that I worked with. He was military police. He did 6 tours in Afghanistan, Iraq, and a combination of some of those pieces. I worked with him for about 3 years. Had 2 TBIs before military and at least 2 afterwards. What we know now, there might have been more of that. There was times where things were really rocky. We spent a lot of time building relationship because of the TBI. There was lots of times that there was information that had to get repeated. We developed a lot of skills. I did a lot of skill building for that particular client, which is great. It's not necessarily something you think about in the way that we did it in therapy. Like we would talk about, get your notebook out. This is something you need to write down. You know, these are the things that to remember, because he had a very great memory before the TBIs and was just so frustrated that he could not remember from 1 minute to the next. And I was like, you can write, like, this is going to be your external memory from now. Don't put it all in there, because it's just making you more frustrated.
Yeah.
And then you're less likely to do the things that are going to help you to feel better. And you're going to get bogged down and stuck in that swirl about what it is that you should have been able to do. So let's just use this and to really embrace that factor. And when he was embracing it, he was amazing. It was amazing. And when he wasn't, he would be like, I'm not using my notebook. I know, I'm frustrated. and then also having him be able to share some of that with his kids, you know, when they were getting frustrated about something, you know, being able to, the key, I think, for him was taking what he learned in therapy about the things that were working and being able to pass them on to somebody else was
That's
like
super
the
cool.
key. And so I think that's another message just to think about too, is that if you can go through this, think about sharing your story with somebody else, because you never know what one thing that you said or one thing that you did or whatever might be the changing factor for somebody else, why they decided to do it, why they took you up on this, why they looked up this, you know, just continuing to share that and be able to use what you've used. It gave him purpose again.
Yeah. I tell all of our guests in here, like, that's where our shadow of silence comes from. Like, you going through that situation could save so many lives. My story about the soldier sitting in the basement drinking, might hear a story that can happen every single time. So like, having the hard conversations and talking about this, talking about your clients, and I feel it's why we are doing this. It's incredibly important to me. And where can people go to find it?
Yeah, www.theheadstrongproject.org.
Kathryn, thank you again for coming on. Thank you for telling your story, and we'll put the link and everything on there for all the listeners.
Great.
If you want to go to the Headstrong Project. So thank you, Kathryn.
Thank you.